Hey everybody. So I wanted to put this out there, get this toss this information out there, right? Because there are so many different categories of who falls under the TransQueer umbrella, right? The identification of being trans, and who actually falls prey to the LGBTQ plus TransQueer movement. And so it may not be so easy figuring out who belongs in which group for a lot of people, right? And I think that this is most important for figuring out how we pray for specific people, how we minister to them directly, and how we go about deliverance for these individuals. So one thing that we can be sure of is that each of them, every single one of them that falls, regardless of what category they fall into, they are not only in need of forgiveness, but they are forgivable. So the most targeted of this group is those who are vulnerable, right? Under the traumatized ones. Now, there are a lot of victims out there, and these individuals are the perfect targets for this movement, for this agenda, for the LGBTQ plus trans queer movement. And this is who they focus on. So they focus on those who have had traumatic experiences, right? Like molestation, abuse, trafficking, and the abuse, right? That could be sexual, physical, emotional, or those that come from like a very broken home. They're usually the first to be targeted by this diabolical cult. Then there are the mentally challenged, right? The ones with autism, that are on the spectrum, the ones that are like, Asperger's, stuff like that, underlying issues, people, those that have comorbidities, and those with disorders like bulimia, depression, anxiety, behavior disorders, etc. So all targets of predators of the LGBTQ plus trans queer cult, because they are vulnerable and they can be easily manipulated, easily lured in, easily seduced, easily swayed, easily bamboozled, right? Convinced, and easily conditioned. And so some people just struggle with fitting in, right? With matching up, with being, they're needy. Some people are just needy. Some people have to deal with a lot of confusion. Some people don't understand their dynamics, their family dynamics. So different things of that sort. So these are individuals just want to belong. They just want to belong to something, right? Anything, and most of the times everything. So this group of conformists, we can kind of think of them as conformists, right? They just follow along with whatever is most popular, whatever the trend is at the time. And so this is the tag along to get along group, right? That we've been able to see throughout history, that jump on whatever bandwagon is present and that gets a lot of attention. And we've seen that like with the punk rockers and the goth and the grunge and all of the other ones, right? So we see these folks are emotionally invested, and they will do all that they can to be countercultural. And so that's one of the most common groups, right? Not the most targeted, but the most common. So the that group, the countercultural tag along to get along group, they don't really have to be targeted, because they're just going to look for something to belong to. And so anyone that has a child, right, they know that attention seekers do not care if it's negative or positive attention that they get, as long as they are receiving attention. So then there are those who are not just trying to fit in, but those who aren't interested in going along to get along. The more dangerous and vile of the LGBTQ plus trans queer cultists, the predators, and the sexually deviant. These are the ones desperately fighting to get into women's spaces, into women's sports, the spas, bathrooms, locker rooms, shelters, etc., even prison cells, especially prison cells. These are the ones who do not always present or identify as trans, except out of convenience. Many of the men that are being placed in women's prisons are guilty of heinous crimes against women and children. But many of these men actually keep their fetishes and their perversions and their deviant behaviors hidden until it's convenient to lean on those, right? So it is those in this category that do not keep their deviant fetish behaviors hidden, right? Those that are the most dangerous of this group. And all of the ones that fall into this latter category, the predator deviant category, are either extremely dangerous or they have a very high potential to be extremely dangerous. But how do we know who these individuals are, right? Because I mean, I talk to a lot of people and they're like, well, there's a trans in the prison, and then there's a trans in my son's in my daughter's school and my son's school, and they're on the sports team, and then there's a trans that is working at the store, and then there's this trans, and then my child identifies as trans, and so they don't know that these are all different, that these are not just all trans identified people. They're not all gender dysphoric, right? Some of them have some very dark paraphilias or deviant ways, deviant fetishes. And the most common way to identify these deviants is by simply paying attention to who is defending, who is fighting for, who's encouraging, who's promoting, and who's celebrating the entirety of the TransQueer cult and its symbolic flag, okay? Because it is not a rainbow. It's a symbol, it's a sigil, it's demonic. Are all of the defenders, I want to try to go to a little post that I put up because I also wanted to say that anyone who tries to isolate someone that is trying to protect children is very suspect of this, of one of these categories. Anyone who tries to silence someone that is empowering others to keep children from being victimized is also suspect of falling into one of these categories. And that goes for legislators, candidates, pastors, church folk, conservatives, Republicans, liberals, progressives, Democrats, socialists, whatever you identify, you are suspect if you hinder and don't help. Perversion knows no party, right? Perversion knows no denomination. Perversion knows no religion. All right. So we have to remember that. And so that like leads to the question, like, are all of the ones that are defending and promoting the LGBTQ plus TransQueer cult dangerous predators? So I would say that they're dangerous, but predators, not all of them, but definitely the majority of them. So whether they're AGP, right, or autogynephiles, or whether they're fetishes, they are very serious. They're a very serious danger to women and children and society in general. Mostly because not all of these men publicly display their perversions. They hide it so that they can continue to navigate through life under the guise of being someone else altogether, right? Not being a pervert, and being a family man. So AGP, autogynephile, fetishists, transvestites, cross-dressers, violent psychopaths, etc., right? They can all fall under this last category. Many of these men present as men. They have wives and families and careers and businesses, and some of them are politicians. And so then there are the ones that begin to transition into their darkest and most deviant levels of this group. And so the ones that allow their deviant sexual fetishes and their desires to have rule and reign over on their lives and over their lives, these are the ones who are still AGP, but they have allowed, or fetishes, and they allowed their lewd, lascivious fetishes and predatorial behaviors to have total rule and reign over their lives, the most dangerous of that category. So every single male in a women's prison is guilty of heinous crimes against women and or children, and is a direct danger to any woman or child. Every man that has chosen to leave his wife and his family for this fetish or this perversion is a danger to women and children. Every man that puts on a dress, a wig, makeup, and some women's undergarments or even nail polish is a threat to women and children. Every single one of them. And so if we don't really grasp this and understand, and I can imagine right now somebody's like, well, what is AGP? AGP or autogynephile, they are males who are sexually aroused by the thought of themselves as women. Hold on one second. All right, I did put it up there. I couldn't really see it. So they are aroused by the thought of themselves as women, but do not actually want to become women, and or wearing women's clothing, even especially not even but especially undergarments. And so, like when I was a trans prostitute, most of my clients were wealthy CEOs of $1 million companies, huge companies. Um, they were judges, lawyers, politicians. So the very ones that are pushing bills, making judgments, um, those people, those were back in my day, and we're talking just say 35 years ago, 40 years ago. Those were the ones that were keeping it completely hidden. Transvestites, males, females that are sexually aroused by wearing opposite sex clothing, especially undergarments. And so what a paraphilia, what's a paraphilia? A paraphilia is a condition that's characterized by abnormal sexual desires, typically involving extreme and or dangerous activities, like pedophilia, rape, bestiality, autogynephilia, transvestism, and this list goes on and on and on. And so I think like what's most important to recognize and realize in this is that so these are the individuals that back in my day were keeping it hidden. They would come to my hotel room or my apartment and they would remove their male clothing, their three-piece suit, and they would have on female or women's undergarments underneath their clothes. And so, and these individuals can be very aggressive, very dangerous. Um, and sometimes they were wearing their own wife's undergarments or their daughters, which was not uncommon. So just understand that this perversion, these deviant behaviors are not uncommon. And we all probably come into contact with several people that fall into these categories on a daily basis and don't even know it. So yeah, I just wanted to put this out there. I wanted people to be aware of what's happening, what's going on, and I wanted them to be aware of that. Like when we are talking about trans identified individuals, that they're not just clumping them all together, that they don't see a gender dysphoric individual and toss them into the category of some pervert in prison trying to, or in a women's prison, and so that's why it's important to know that there are many different categories, different facets of being identified as trans under this TransQueer umbrella. So, and I wanted to keep this short, so I'm gonna sign off. I will be going live this afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with an amazing update and video clip of a few encounters, but amazing update on what the Ask an X Trans Anything outreach has been accomplishing, and it's just been amazing. It really has. It's been phenomenal, mind blowing, and I'm blessed. I'm honored. I'm grateful to be used in such a way, and yeah. So hopefully see some of y'all at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Standard Time. Peace.